Find yourself avoiding, procrastinating, absolutely dreading the simple fact that there might be a conversation that you need to have? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. It's the psychology of avoidance. We want to help you get on the other side of that so you can stop avoiding things. Check it out. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Positivity Experience. It's your girl, Lori. Man, am I excited that we are here today. We are in April. My birthday just passed. I'm recording this before, so I'm hoping I had a good birthday. Wow, this year's flying by. And you might be avoiding things, and you might have been avoiding things for a very long time. So I want to talk to you today about the psychology of it and give you some steps on how to work through it. Now, over on Patreon, if you're wondering what that is the paid version of a podcast that helps me give you the worksheet. It's a play-by-play. We go deeper over there. I personally like to have a hands-on. I can read things, I can see things, I can listen to things. Even though it's a starting point, I personally need step by step, like how exactly do I do this? If that's your jam, pop over to Patreon, patreon.com/the positivity experience, and we can go from there. It's also, the link is in there for the free workbook. There is a free letting go workbook. Now, there is going to be an additional workbook that will not be free, but this one is free. There's 10 pages there. You can find that in any services or anything that you're seeking on my website, which is the same name as this, the Positivity Experience, or you can find all of that information in the description wherever you're getting this podcast today. So I want to talk to you about the psychology behind avoidance, because there's a lot there. It's important to understand a lot of times we shame ourselves. Now, that's also not your voice that you're hearing. You're hearing this from a perfectionism place. You don't want to disappoint people, everything of the above. But I need you to understand that avoidance isn't really procrastination. It's a coping mechanism, and that's rooted in fear and discomfort. So as human beings, we're not really wired for discomfort. We're not really wired to go like, you know what? This is fabulous. Whoa, I'm discomfort. I'm uncomfortable. But if you don't face it, you're going to stay in this constant loop. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. However, to help you break down that avoidance, that's where you start really focusing in on just 3 things that you want to do. Micro tasks, various things like this. And we will get there. But a lot of what we do in our avoidance is self-inflicted. Now, we understand that it's why. There's a why there. So there's no need to shame yourself or guilt yourself. And, you have a good dialogue for that. Oh, you should have done this. Why didn't you do this? Oh, man, you know that you're supposed to do these things. That dialogue is never going to give you the assertion or the inspiration to go through and to confront things. I mean, it just isn't, because you're telling yourself, I'm stupid, I'm less than, I'm invalid because I didn't do blank. And again, that is not your voice. That's another voice that you heard. And you have to realize that why the avoidance is so rewarding to you. Because there's a reward there. If I avoid it, oh God, I don't have to feel uncomfortable. But I always use the cat litter theory, like how I do it, is if you have a cat, I have 3. If you have a cat and there's cat litter, cat goes in the box, cat goes in the cat litter. They cover it up with their paws, right? They're like, okay, well, this is done. At the end of the day, if you don't empty that cat litter, they're not going to go in the cat box anymore. And that doesn't go anywhere. All you've done was cover it up. You've hid the smell. You've done those things. It's gone for a moment, but it isn't gone. So until you address it, now listen, you might be able to skip a day. You might even be able to skip 2 days. But that 3rd day, 4th day, it's going to get bad. You're going to smell it. The cats aren't going to like it. It's disrespectful to them. It's disrespectful to you. That is where you are. So if you need to go through life and going, I'm avoiding this, that's in the cat box. It has been very pivotal for me because I need visuals. That's the whole reason why I do the Patreon worksheet. I need visuals. And if you can look at it that way, it kind of takes that personalization out of it, because at the end of the day, it's still there. That's the gray elephant in the room when they say, we need to address the gray elephant. And I know that you've had these moments where you're at a group or you're at Thanksgiving or you're with all of these people and there's a situation there and everybody's like, how was your day? And they're like, it was great. Meanwhile, there's all this tension. You ever walk into a room or sit in a conversation and there's some empty space and you're like, pink. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? I just need to fill this space. And that is avoidance of having a conversation. Now, a lot of times we do that because we fear rejection. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to go there. But there are strategies that you can work through it. So what are you really avoiding? Because we look at it and we go, if I avoid it, again, cat litter, right? If I avoid it, I can avoid that discomfort. But here's what happens. It doesn't just linger in your brain for 5 minutes. No, now it's Sunday. Okay, it's Sunday and you're going to have this conversation with your boss, or you need to have a conversation to tell somebody that you're not going to make it next weekend to an event. Here you are Saturday and Sunday night. And I mean, you are lamenting on this. You're like, oh my God, okay. Oh, I guess I got to reach out to them, because avoidance can also, at the end of the day, cause problems because you're avoiding telling somebody that you're not going to show up on Saturday to something because you don't want to or whatever. And now it's Monday. Now it's Wednesday. You're like, oh my God, I really got to say it. Now it's Friday evening. And now you're like, hey, and I don't mean an emergency or like a quick change. You've known you don't want to go. You've known this for a while. However, you're like, I just don't want it. So now you've waited to the last moment where you knew about this a week ago, which is also why you don't commit, right? There's 2 sentences that will help you through life. I cannot commit to that right now. Let me get back to you. Those are 2 powerful sentences. And just a side note, that will help you avoid some things. Now, that's not avoidance like, oh, I said this, I don't have to respond to it. No, that just means that you're stopping yourself from committing to something in that haste of fear. Where it's like, hey, do you want to come over? Yeah, oh my God, yes. And you're like, why the hell did I just commit to that? So this will prevent that. So the more that you avoid, often you are creating contentious situations just because you don't want to disappoint somebody. Well, if you're worried about not disappointing somebody and not making them angry, then you're going to stay stuck and you're going to stay in a people-pleasing cycle that we talked about last week. You're going to stay in that cycle. And then you're going to breed resentment. All of these things are happening. Now you seem wishy-washy where you just, and by the way, if you don't want to go, that's a plenty reason. Just don't wait to the last minute. And you don't need to go into a thesis behind that. So in general, what you're avoiding, procrastination. Let's chat about procrastination. By the way, I have a whole ass podcast on procrastination and a worksheet. Go back. It's probably months ago, but it's all titled, so you'll be able to see it. But procrastination itself is a coping strategy. Now that's rooted in fear. See, procrastination is rooted in fear. Overwhelm, yes, but it's also rooted in fear. It's the anxiety, it's like an emotional overwhelm. And if you're constantly putting it off, you're delaying conversations or avoiding taking action. This is where the problem goes. So procrastination, let's chat about that. You guys know, I say it on my Instagram, on my stories every morning. If I'm working out, I cannot begin to tell you every single solitary day that I wake up, the first 30 seconds, the first half a minute, I am going, okay, well, I got a lot to do today. I got a headache. I don't really feel like going. Like, this is a chronic thing. I immediately have to change my mindset. Now, for me, I do have to be a little bit more aggressive. It's not guilting myself. It's like, all right, like, get your shit together. You know, you feel better. Let's go. So that works for me. I don't need a coddling approach for me. And I really don't coddle my clients either, because sometimes you need that aggression or that assertion. So I immediately say, how will I feel afterwards? Now, let me also give you a little bit of please adopt this if it feels comfortable to you. I will tell you what works for me with procrastination when it comes to the gym or working out, Lori. And honestly, you can do this anywhere because I have it in 2 places. I give myself a reward when I go to the gym or I walk or I lift weights, I work out. I download Audible books. Right? Not self-help. Stop working out through self-help. That's nauseating. No. I am like many other people. I like thriller and murder and all these things. So I download a book, but I only allow myself to listen to that book when I'm doing an activity of working out. Like, this is it. I can't listen to it any other time. So as the book gets better, I'm like, ooh, I want to hear that more. Now it's self-discipline. I guess I could listen to it whenever I want, but it's a reward I give myself. So then I'm like, okay, well, I want to move my body, even if it's a walk. Now I have a separate book because I can't use the same book. That doesn't work in my brain. I like to delineate and differentiate. That's why I have the 5 journals. I have a separate podcast, and sometimes a podcast, it's Audible, but sometimes I am listening to my true crime. Again, don't listen to self-help when you're cleaning. Don't listen to self-help when you're working. I mean, you can listen to this podcast. It's fine. But when I say self-help, it's like you're listening to a whole ass book on self-help. Podcast is fine. Just don't start downloading things. Now, I will say Atomic Habits, which is one of my favorite books ever, as far as, not procrastinating, things like that. That's the exception. And I will listen to things like that or the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Little bit different than self-help. It's more goal-oriented and action-oriented versus feel good about yourself, right? So you can look at that either way, but you can only listen to those things in that moment. So these are the small rewards that you're giving yourself. It doesn't always have to be food or spending a ton of money. So this might help you a little bit. I kind of detoured a little bit to give you my tip on what I do. And it really does work, because I give myself those times. It's the same thing with reading a book. If I'm reading a book, I can only read it at certain times. And so you use it as a reward system. So you're always reinforcing something positive. So give it a try. Again, kind of delineate it off of that and went somewhere else, but it is what it is. So the procrastination also goes into perfectionism. If I can't do it right, I'm not going to do it at all. Well, we know some of that goes into childhood. Because I can speak for myself. Of course, I'm 54, right? So I can speak for myself. I don't know if as many people do this now, but it was this chronic, if you can't do it right, don't do it at all. Well, what the hell is that? First of all, right is relative, right? So the way you load a dishwasher and your right might be different than mine. So now I'm basically telling you, if you don't do it my way, then don't do it at all. Well, then you get mad because the person doesn't do it. And now you're like, well, you're not doing it. Because if you constantly go behind somebody and you're constantly changing the dishwasher, then do it yourself. Because if you're going to ask for help and you want someone to do it, then just accept it for what it is. Don't let your perfectionism kick in, because then you're going to be like, I do everything around here. You're inflicting that on yourself. So going back into the perfectionism part of it, you will procrastinate because you create these big to-dos. I'm going to clean and declutter the whole kitchen this weekend. Oh my God, you're not. And if you do, you're going to burn yourself out. And for the next 6 weeks, you're not going to do anything. You got to remember, you're looking for fast fixes. And we've talked about this in multiple podcasts, multiple episodes. The more fast fixes that you're looking for and you're overloading your plate, of course you're going to avoid it. You're going to avoid it because there's effort. You're also going to avoid it because you're like, I need it done this way. Well, my God, that's why it's taken me so long to get my book done, because I have changed it a few times because I have like 18 books inside of me that I keep trying to put in one giant book, and that's not cool. So I've just been breaking it down, not from a perfectionism place, but bite-sized pieces. Well, guess what? That means I've had to redo things. I've had to slow my roll. I've had to give myself smaller goals. That's how I will not continue to procrastinate. So you're avoiding it by dealing with these things of overwhelm, of saying it must be this way. So instead of decluttering a kitchen, which I talked about actually on the Patreon, instead of decluttering the kitchen, declutter one drawer, declutter one shelf of a cabinet. And you're like, well, my God, it's just one. Yes. One step will get you to the end of a finish line of a marathon. One step. But until you stop trying to do it all, you will sit in avoidance. That procrastination will stay over and over and over again. So what is avoidance really? Because, that's kind of a good thing too. So avoidance is the act of deliberately steering away from discomfort, whether it's emotional, physical, logical. It's often an unconscious things. And that's the biggest thing too, because you're like, well, it's unconscious. But let's go back to that definition. Avoidance, very important to understand this. Avoidance is the act of deliberately, on purpose, steering away from discomfort. Let's leave it there. It doesn't matter what else is included with that. That is what's happening. So it's going to go right back into what it always goes back into is getting out of the comfort zone. Listen, I get it. And everybody asks, what's the magic pill? What's the magic, solution? How do I gain confidence? And okay, honestly, the answer to every one of those questions is you have to walk into the discomfort. I don't care how it really feels to you. And you shouldn't care how it really feels to you because feelings aren't facts. You have to look and say, what is the end goal? What is my why? But also, what do I want to feel? And peace and tranquility isn't where you're going to go first place. That's not where we're going. If you want to feel accomplished and you want to do those things, don't look at it as a whole. Let's say you're moving. Don't look at it as having to pack the whole house. You're going to pack one closet. This way you can give yourself, so you're not waiting to the 11th hour. You see this a lot in like college or school. You're avoiding. Night before, we're cramming for tests. We're trying to do our papers. Now we're stressed. Now the paper's like half-assed because we waited to the last minute. Well, until you stop doing that, you are creating such a high level of stress. Now avoidance becomes your go-to tool. Now you see this a lot in attachment theory too. This is a little different, right? When you're talking about avoidance of doing a closet, an attachment, avoid an attachment, but they ultimately have the similar trajectory. So if you're avoidance in relationships, you're avoidance in your emotions, you're avoidant in addressing it, you're avoidant, what's the same exact thing? It's the same exact thing as you avoiding a task. It's still discomfort. And that is the secret. If you're like, how do I get more confident? Discomfort, walk into it. Well, how do I stop procrastinating? Discomfort. You're too worried about being comfortable. You're definitely too worried about not doing it right. Until you embrace failure and the benefits and the joy behind failure, you will stay in tough relationships. You will stay in bad situations, especially in relationships. We talked a lot about this too, right? You're sitting there and you say, I don't want to have to deal with blank. I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Stop saying that. Because the more you're trying to avoid hurting somebody's feelings, you are isolating yourself. You are removing yourself from saying, I matter. This is what feels good to me. I mean, you got to say, am I important? Because it does come down to that. Am I important? And you got to walk into the uncomfortable. Very, very important. Scrolling. Okay, so let's give you some avoidance things that you do. Scrolling on your phone. Oh my God, this is the biggest hurdle that I have with some of my clients. I don't scroll social media. I've told you guys this. Yes, I have short form on there. Yes, a lot of you come to this podcast through my social forums. I record, I post, scheduling, I post it, and that's it. I schedule it. I will go on, I will look up recipes. This is intentional scrolling, very different. If I'm going on to look up something, that's different than just scrolling for the sake of scrolling. But people will avoid life and sit behind their phone and scroll. And we know that there's a dopamine hit. There's a whole ass podcast on that. But this is a massive avoidance. And you're avoiding difficult conversations in general. You're putting off the important tasks until the last minute, which is what I was just saying. I got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. And then you're convincing yourself. And this is a big one. Oh, it's just not the right time. I don't know if the timing's right. Well, guess what? It's never going to be right. It's never going to be right because you're always going to look at it. So let's say you're going to have, let's give you an example. Let's say you're in a relationship, you live with the person and you are like, I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. But it's November. So now you go, oh my God, but the holidays are here. I really don't want to be uncomfortable through the holidays. So I'm going to do this in January. Like I'll do this once January comes. Cool. We get through the holidays. You're miserable now because you didn't have this conversation. So now it's January. Now you're like, oh, but it's cold out. It's cold outside. Like I don't really want to have to deal with it. It's cold. Well, now we're moving the goalpost. Then it's spring. Then it's closer to their birthday. You don't want to do it then. Oh, then it's summer and you've already had plans. So here we are a year later and you're in the same exact place. Stop waiting for the right time. You see this a lot in diet culture. Oh, I'll start on Monday. Why? Why not start Wednesday too? Why? Well, because you're avoiding. So stop waiting for this right time. Stop waiting for the last minute. The brain sees discomfort as a threat. That's just how the brain works. That's a human trait since the beginning of time. So it sees it as a threat. And then it's going to prioritize immediate relief over a long-term reward. Short-term, long-term. Immediate gratification, delayed gratification. The immediate gratification will create an issue 90% of the time. It really will. It really will. It's that long-term goal. You've heard it. Oh, the tortoise and the hare, right? It's an analogy that's been around for decades. When you accept that it's a baby step. It is one step at a time. It is doing these things that you might not find immediate relief to. It's saying, I want to start a business, and immediately going directly into, this is the name of the business. I want it to be blue. Okay, why are we there? You better research this. That means you got to study, what do you need? What do you need to start this business? Are you going to have an LLC? Are you going to have an S Corp? What does that look like? What do you know? Do you have an overhead? Will you need a loan? Will there need to be insurance? How are you going to go about getting your tax ID number? What is your ideal client? Those are all things just right there, just 2 minutes that people avoid. Oh, this is going to be pretty and this is my logo. Who the hell cares about a logo? Then you go, oh my God, it's just a lot. Yes, of course it's a lot, because you don't want to do the research. You see this a lot in Buddhism. Oh, I just want the peace, love, and happiness. That's not a thing until you understand why you want to practice Buddhism. You got to understand where it originated. What are the various practices within the Buddhist practice? What does this look like if you're going to commit to it? Don't worry about the peace, love, and happiness. You're running towards a reward that you're not going to get and you're not going to know. I've used this Super Bowl ring multiple times. I could give you a Super Bowl ring today. What does that mean? Oh, look at a Super Bowl ring. You enter in that ring. You're not going to get the benefits out of it. You're going to be a fake and a phony of, look, I went to the Super Bowl. Yeah, nobody believes that. So you got to remember, it is delayed gratification. There's psychology behind it. And I told you before, fear of failure. Fear of failure. Oh, or success. We talked about that too. Fear of failure is keeping you so stuck. It is such a beautiful thing. How else will you learn a lesson? Always remember this. And I say this over and over, and I'll probably say it in every podcast. Things 100% always works out for you. Always. It just may not be as you want it, may not be as you plan it, but it's a lesson. You're learning a lesson. Which now, what you do with that lesson is up to you. If you keep repeating the same patterns, we got to address that. But if you learn a lesson and it causes you to pivot, it worked out. It just didn't work out as you wanted it to. So this is very important. So your fear of failure is an issue. Fear of success can be just as bad. That's right. Because now you've reached this level of success. So now in your mind, you got to maintain it, right? Like you have a high bar now, which doesn't always have to be bad, but it is if you're constantly in the place where you're avoiding starting something because you're afraid of it, or you're succeeding and then you're expecting yourself to maintain it. At the end of the day, it still goes back to fear of failure. You've hit it big. You've done the things. You got the things. Well, now what's going to happen? How can you maintain that? So there's a fear in between versus staying in the present space, working on that, accepting it for where you are today. Now, psychologically, it also stems from perfectionism and self-worth. Self-worth goes right in with perfectionism. So your wounds right there is if your worth is tied to performance, failure feels catastrophic. Think about that in your childhood. If I failed on a test, I got a D. If I got an E and I failed the English test, well, guess what? There's something wrong with you. You hear how bad you are. You hear how stupid you are. You hear how you didn't dedicate yourself. Now, this was big in my time because I have ADHD. This was big in my time, but ADHD, quote unquote, wasn't real, right? It's a bullshit thing. Why? Just sit down and be quiet, pay attention, all these things that make you feel like, what's wrong with me? Because that's what happens. People are a lot bit more aware of it now, but there's still plenty of things that people can still get diagnosed with in as you get older, right? It's never too early or too late to be early maybe, but never too late to be diagnosed with ADHD. But if you're constantly in this place of saying my self-worth means if I do this and you're happy with me, I'm worthy. If I start, and you see this a lot with workaholics, I am a CEO of a company and here I am. And yes, okay, there's going to be a little bit of, more responsibility that comes onto you. But you identify yourself as the CEO. I am a CEO. I am amazing. I am a CEO. Yep. And then you retire. And now you're like, oh my God, who am I? I have a great client. He used to run he was like a CEO or like up there of an elevator company. Elevators everywhere. It's a certain one. And we were really working through on his identity. He was everything. He was all over. He would do articles. He taught people. He trained people. And then it was time to retire. He was like, oh, I'm so excited to retire. Till he wasn't. It's like, oh my God, I don't even know who the hell I am, because we get so comfortable with that identity. And the moment it gets taken away, this is the danger zone. If you attach your worth to a relationship, you feel loved, you feel those things, which sometimes is attachment in general. And then that relationship ends. Well, now what is that in your mind? What does that say about you? You're not worthy. You lack depth. There's something wrong with you. Like, you can't see past that. So you are attaching your value to this. So of course, you're afraid of having a conversation. You're going to avoid a conversation in case the person gets upset with you and breaks up with you, or, whatever. And now you're not worthy because you should have sucked it up. I know for a fact some of you are like, oh my God, that's me. I know that. And that's what you have to say. Okay, how can I switch that? And we'll get there. Never shame yourself, but be aware of it. So many people don't want to take the accountability of the awareness. But when you do that, that's where the power comes back into your hand. It's very, very important. Thoughts that reinforce it. If I try and fail, what does that say about me? If I succeed, I'll just raise the bar and burn out. Now, there's some truth to that last one. You can burn out. Go back to the burnout podcast I did a few weeks ago. You can. Yeah, that's right. Because you're trying so hard. If you burn out, you're not going to be good to anybody, especially yourself. Now you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. If I try and fail, what does that say about me? It doesn't say anything about you. It means that, okay, what worked, what didn't, and you recalibrate. It doesn't say anything about you. It says that you're a human being. It says that you're aware that something didn't work. It says, wow, okay, I see this isn't working. Let me be proactive and not attach my value to it. Oh my God, that's great. Emotional discomfort and anxiety. Avoidance is used to absolutely regulate your emotional distress. So if you're avoidant and you're in emotional distress, you say, if I avoid it, it'll go away. We were just talking about that a second ago. If I avoid it, it will go away. And in that moment, in that half of a second, you're like, oh my God, good. I'll have to deal with it. But again, cat litter, gray elephant, it's still lingering. And often by avoiding a task or a conversation, it doesn't really give you the benefit that you're seeking because it's just there. And again, you're waiting to the last minute. Now we go back into that. You have to remember the brain learns by avoiding something uncomfortable. You get this short-term dopamine reward. You really do. You do. You say, oh God, I'll deal with it today. Thank God. It's a very short-term reward. But that's reinforcing this behavior. And then that's making the avoidance grow bigger over time. So you're still getting that instant gratification because you're like, oh my God, good. I don't have to deal with it. I can talk about it on Monday, but then Sunday comes, Sunday comes, and now it becomes bigger and bigger. And often the more you avoid something, not only is it going to be problematic for you, it can be problematic for the situation. Like I said before, hey, are you going to come over on Saturday? And you're like, oh yeah, because you've committed. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'll be over. And a week into it, you're like, I am not going. I have zero desire to go. I'm not going to go, which is valid. But once again, you avoiding it, now it creates a whole problem. So you have to remember that the avoidance that you think is protecting yourself is actually making it harder for you. So you say, can I deal with this discomfort? Can I deal with this quote unquote guilt or anxiety behind it for a short period of time? Or am I going to delay it and constantly feel it? Because it doesn't go anywhere. Baby's in a corner, baby's going to stay in a corner. Nobody puts baby in a corner. So here's a real life example. You avoid checking your bank account, which I can't, because it triggers anxiety. So it's the more you avoid it, the more anxiety it builds. I mean, I would dare to say most of us could look and go, wow, just paid those bills. Man, that's a lot. But what it does is that's reinforcing the anxiety. Yes, it's good to be aware of it. So you understand for budgeting and all of those things, but avoiding it doesn't make it like, if you're like, I don't want to go into the bank account, it doesn't change the number. So you look at it. Yes, it can be a little stressful and a little breathtaking. And so you say, okay, what do I need to do? Or what awareness can I have with it? Avoidance is not going to be the answer there. Again, more you avoid it, the more anxiety builds. Learned helplessness. Oh my God, this is such a big thing. Or past trauma. If you grew up in an environment where efforts did not lead to results, emotionally unavailable parents or caregivers, Your brain may have adopted the belief, what's the point of trying? It won't change anything. How many of you right now in your mind have said to yourself, what's the point of trying? It won't change anything. Now, where that is true is not so much what's the point of trying, is I have to accept this person for who they are, not for who I want them to be. So this is a little different. I have to radically accept that this person is how they want to be. So yes, stop trying, because nobody is going to do something until they choose to do it. Just because you want it to be different doesn't mean it has to be. So that's where it's like, yeah, okay, but don't do it in such a victim mindset way, because that is a victim mindset. Well, what's the point of trying? It won't change anything. But it will change something. Change how you see it. Change the direction of people in your life. A lot of that is, I don't want to address it. Not so much that it won't change anything, but I don't want anything to change in a relationship. Because for many, you want the relationship to continue because that's how you want it. But you got to allow yourself to walk into that. This leads, by the way, to passive behavior, chronic avoidance, procrastination, especially with emotionally charged tasks. If there's an emotionally charged task, that's going to be the one that you're going to avoid the most. But it really does go into creating passive aggression. It goes into creating this chronic avoidance, which, by the way, becomes an automatic practice. Because sometimes you're like, oh, I didn't realize, I know I avoid, but my God, I didn't realize how much. Again, awareness. But by constantly doing that, you're giving yourself that chronic avoidance, that chronic stress that comes with it. Dopamine dysregulation and decision fatigue. Oh my goodness, this is a whole thing. Decision fatigue is draining, and dopamine dysregulation. Your brain loves quick, rewarding tasks. We know this. That's why social media is a thing. That's why when you're scrolling, you're getting that immediate hit every single time. That's funny. Look at this. Oh, that's new. You're getting that immediate, quick reward. But avoidance often feels more rewarding in the moment than difficult goal-oriented tasks. So I'm pretty sure it's a hell of a lot easier to sit, scroll, look at some cat videos and some cow hoof videos than it is to go and tackle one closet, because you don't want to. Half the time we don't want to do half the shit we have to do. But are you going to sit there and keep putting it off and putting it off? So your avoidance feels more rewarding. You're like, oh God, I don't feel like doing that. Now you feel like you're rewarding yourself. You're not. But they're goal-oriented tasks. One little thing, these micro tasks, literally you can say to yourself, I'm going to drink an additional 8 ounces of water today. Boom, success. Boom, your brain goes, did that. Problem you have is you go, well, that's not a big deal. That's not going to move me towards my goal. Yeah, it is. We have to pump our brakes on that, because you're putting yourself in a place to where you're negotiating with yourself why it can't happen. Every delayed task, every one, adds more weight, and that's creating that decision fatigue. And that makes starting feel even harder. I know from an ADHD brain, there's like an ADHD paralysis, but you don't even have to have that to have paralysis. I've done this. If you take everything out of your closet, because yes, that is actually the best way to do it. You take everything out of your closet. You're like, whoa, I'm so inspired. And you take it out and you're like, oh my God, this looks so good. And you look at the bed and you're like, holy hell, I didn't realize I had all that stuff. Now you're going to go through it in your brain. You've created this whole system. Yes, this is going to be great. Now you look and you're like, oh, wow. Hoo-wee, I am going to sit down and scroll. I am going to sit down and blah, 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 blah. And that's fun. That's not fun. Because now you think that you're stretching, and it's creating this issue so much. And then you're looking and go, I don't even want to start it, or starting it feels impossible. So instead of doing that, how I like to do it is I take one section. Let's take it all out. Take one section, one drawer, one section. I understand you want it faster, but don't you want it to be efficient and where it doesn't feel as crippling? Take it out. Say, okay, am I repurposing this? Am I donating this? Is it something that needs to be thrown out, or am I keeping it? Boom. Do that. Put it away. Walk away. Don't let your brain go, well, you only did one. You can do more. No, we're not going to do that. Small goals. Now, starting is hard, but stopping for some people can be even harder because your perfectionism kicks in. Well, I just started. Oh my God, I can't leave it like that. Yes, you can. Yeah, you can. Because in the long run, you're teaching yourself that it's okay not to have a heightened state of survival, a heightened state of survival. And that's a big deal. Because the more overwhelmed you feel, the more you avoid, and the more you avoid, the more you're overwhelmed you'll feel. That's a loop. That's a loop. So let's walk through that. Okay, you're like, oh my God, I just feel, it's just too much. It's too much. I got to just avoid it. I don't want to deal with it. But then you avoid it and you're like, oh my God, but that's just creating more problems for me. So you're screwed, right? It's the chicken and the egg. The overwhelm, the avoidance, the overwhelm. Oh my God, I feel like shit. So it creates that looped effect. How does the avoidance affect you? Well, many ways, but it tricks your nervous system into believing that you're staying safe. But it's increasing long-term stress, because it will. It destroys confidence and self-trust. It really does. You're destroying self-confidence and definitely self-trust, because now you feel bad because you promised yourself you were going to do this and you didn't do this. So you let yourself down. But why did you let yourself down? Because you looked at Rome and you said, I want to build this in a day. And it doesn't work that way. It starts with leveling the foundation. Building Rome isn't going to happen overnight, and it might take years to build Rome. It's just how it works. So it's that looping feeling, and you're creating that emotional clutter, because that's exactly what that's doing. You're creating this emotional overload. It's reinforcing your fear, because it is, rather than going into resilience, which I do recommend going back to the resilience podcast. It'll really help you with a lot of things. But you're building that fear. You're reinforcing that fear. Oh, I'm going to suck. Oh, it's too much. Oh, it's a lot. Because you're trying to do too many things at one time. And it trains your brain to link action with anxiety. So now your brain goes, if I take action, there's too much going on. Now there's anxiety. It really does. Because remember, your brain, as smart as it is, believes what you tell it. So it's kind of like, bro, that's not real. Like, stop believing that. But your brain believes what you tell it. So as smart as it is, you're kind of driving that at the same time. How to break that avoidance cycle? Well, Again, I'm going to go a hell of a lot stronger and more over on Patreon, but I do want to give you tools here. Identify what you're really avoiding. Okay, so this is where you got to sit and say, what am I really avoiding? So identify it. What am I trying to protect myself from right now? So when you feel yourself avoiding, what am I trying to protect myself from right now? Is it because you don't want to do it because there's too much going on and you have to break the tasks down into small tasks, and then that seems like a task, so you're not doing it? Are you avoiding going, I want to start it, but I don't know how because I'm trying to do it without having a plan? Are you afraid of going, ooh, what if I don't do it right? So you got to get clear, what are you avoiding right now? Because the avoidance is trying to protect yourself from something. Is it judgment? Is it boredom? It's the fear of the unknown of, is it going to work? Because sometimes it isn't just about the kitchen. Sometimes it's about a conversation. Sometimes it's about your livelihood. Sometimes it's about a direction that you may want to change and a conversation that you really need to have in order to not feel so drained all the time. Because it isn't just about things in your house. It is about conversations that you're going to need to have. You really are, because until you have those conversations, it lingers and you feel stuck, and you'll always feel stuck because then you won't look for something else. You're going to live in that place. So you got to get honest with yourself. Get very clear here. Avoidance is really about the emotion, not the task. The avoidance isn't the closet. The avoidance isn't the conversation. It's the emotions that you're attaching to it. Very much like a lot of things that we do. You never set a boundary out of emotion. You never walk into the emotion thinking that it's facts. These are all very, very important things that you're aware of. Name the emotion and reframe it. Use emotional labeling. This is so good in many other places besides just avoidance. You have to remember that your emotion is not a fact. It's a feeling and it's real to you. We can acknowledge that, but it's not a fact. So when you do emotional labeling, this will help a lot. This will help with things like, side note from this, kind of this, but not really. When you're having anxiety, you're saying, I'm anxiety. Stop. It's an anxiety moment. So it gives you, not that you're not going to feel scared and like you're dying from an anxiety, because you will, but you look at it and you take the situation from the emotion, or the other way around. So I feel anxious because I don't want to be judged. Label this. I feel blank, but there's a reason. I feel anxious because I don't want to be judged. I feel anxious because I don't know how that person is going to receive this side of the conversation. I feel anxious because I don't want someone to be disappointed in me. So the anxiety part of it is attached to the emotion. And when you see that, my goodness, it's kind of a life changer, because you'll be able to see things and go, oh, wow, I really see what my fears are. And I see I'm responding or I'm avoiding out of emotion. It really does give you clarity, and it gives you, oh my gosh, so much more confidence. I feel overwhelmed because I don't want to fail. I feel overwhelmed because if I fail, what does that say about me? Now you're attaching your value and your self-worth to this idea of failure. You got to reframe this failure thing as lessons. You got to reframe this failure as teachers. I'm either going to ooh, wow, I did really like the way I wanted it to. That's amazing. Or am I willing to pivot? And that means you have to be willing to walk into that. But if you feel overwhelmed, is it because you don't want to fail? So now you're labeling it. You got to remind yourself that avoidance increases anxiety, action reduces it. So really think about this, right? Avoidance increases anxiety, and action is where you want to be. There's a 5-minute rule. Tell yourself you only have to do the task for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Now, I like the Pomodoro technique, but you might not be able to start with 25 minutes. 5-minute rule. Do any task for 5 minutes and set it. This means don't worry about finishing it. Just start it and that's it. Just start it. That's it. What this does is it lowers the resistance and it tricks the brain into starting. It really does, because 5 minutes, you can do anything for 5 minutes. Often you'll continue after the 5 minutes because the hardest part was starting, but knowing that you only have to do it for 5 minutes and then stop if you want. If you want to go a little longer, that you can. It's like going for a walk. You're like, oh, I don't feel like going for a walk today. It's hot. I don't feel like it. You put on your shoes. Yeah, you're more inclined to go for a walk. You're setting yourself up for success. The micro tasks. Avoidance obviously thrives in the overwhelm. So you're breaking those tasks into small tasks. Put 5 things away. That's it. You don't have to worry about doing everything. 5 things. Look at any 5 things. Make them simple too. Pens, paper, trash. That doesn't matter. 5 things go away. Because each small win actually activates your dopamine, and that builds momentum. Because you're like, wow, I did it. Yay, that's exciting. Read 1 page of a book. Start 1 chapter of your book. It doesn't matter what it is. It's giving you that. Use a discomfort tracker. This is really cool. Keep a simple log of what you're avoiding. Doesn't matter what it is. How uncomfortable it feels and what happens if you do it anyway. That piece. What happens if you do it anyway? So even though you're like, I don't like it, it's uncomfortable, blah, I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes. How's that feel? Now, if you tell yourself, well, it doesn't seem like it made a big difference, now you're in perfectionism. That's a perfectionism indicator. I mean, I started it. My God, I barely did anything. I put some tape away and I put my cup in the recycling. The hell? Yeah, well, that matters. And if you don't think that that's enough, then you'll know that it's going into perfectionism or high expectations. Over time, you're going to prove to yourself that the discomfort is survival. You will. The comfortable is a survival skill. The discomfort is empowering. Practice self-compassion. You got to practice self-compassion, not shame. Avoidance is a learned skill. It's not a character flaw. It's a learned skill. It's not in your character. It's not how you got to be for the rest of your life. Being aware of what it is and giving yourself that, it's not coddling. You're a reminder. So instead of criticizing yourself, use curiosity. Be curious. What made that feel hard today? What was it? What was I feeling? What support would make this easier next time? Is it my planning? Is it my strategy? You're not lazy. You're wired for comfort. You're not lazy. You're wired for comfort. Action doesn't require motivation. You're going to do it scared, but do it messy. My theory for doing anything I do is do it messy. Just do it. It can be crappy, but I'm doing it. And that's going to help you. Do it messy, not do it perfect at all. So always remember that you're not lazy. You're wired for comfort. Now, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to push through it? Or are you going to avoid pushing through it? Start small. Start small. But understanding why you're avoiding it is going to give you so much more power. Because right now you feel stuck. You feel overwhelmed. You feel like you're in this loop and you hate it. But let's stop avoiding it. Let's start taking action. Check it out.